There are two kinds of people in this world. People who hear a supercharged V8 at full throttle and feel absolutely nothing, and people who hear that same sound and immediately forget whatever responsible adult thing they were supposed to be doing. If you're watching this channel, you already know which one you are. Ford has been building machines that scramble your brain and empty your wallet for over 60 years. From drag strip assassins to NASCAR homologation specials to factory supercharged monsters that modern European sports cars have nightmares about. These are the 12 fastest Ford muscle cars ever built. Buckle up, this is going to move quickly. Number 12, the 1969 Ford Torino Cobra 428 Super Cobra Jet. A car that never got the respect it deserved. And honestly, that's exactly what made it dangerous. The 1969 Ford Torino Cobra wore what Ford called a sports roof body style, which is a fancy way of saying it had a sleek fastback silhouette that looked, to most people on the street, like a perfectly ordinary midsize Ford. Nothing to worry about, nothing to fear, move along. That was the trap. Underneath that innocent sheet metal sat the 428 cubic inch Super Cobra Jet V8. Ford officially rated it at 335 horsepower, which was so conservative it bordered on fiction. Real-world dyno testing told a completely different story, with actual output pushing considerably closer to 400 horses. Ford was deliberately sandbagging the numbers to keep insurance companies from having a complete nervous breakdown. Smart, sneaky, absolutely on brand. The engine breathed through a Holley 4-barrel carburetor, featured an external oil cooler for sustained high-speed punishment, and backed up its straight-line credentials with a 4-speed, close-ratio, top-loader manual transmission. The 430-to-1 rear axle ratio meant this car launched off the line with a violence that genuinely surprised people who thought they were racing a family sedan. 0 to 60 came in around 6.4 seconds. The quarter-mile fell in the high 13s. Those were numbers that put the Torino Cobra in legitimate conversation with the Chevelle SS and the Plymouth Roadrunner. Except, nobody saw it coming, which was, of course, the entire point. The Torino Cobra never became a legend the way the Mustang did. It never got the poster on the bedroom wall. But if you lined them up at a stoplight in 1969, the Torino Cobra would have been the last thing you saw before your ego quietly packed its bags and left town. Number 11, the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. Ford didn't build the Thunderbolt to sell. Ford built the Thunderbolt to destroy. This was a factory drag racer wearing street-legal clothing, and the disguise was about as convincing as putting a top hat on a crocodile. The heart of the Thunderbolt was the 427 cubic inch big block V8, officially rated at 425 horsepower. Unofficially, with a compression ratio of 13.5 to 1 and tubular exhaust headers that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a vendetta against the laws of physics. Real-world output was considerably closer to 600 horses. In a car that Ford had stripped of everything heavy and unnecessary. Radio, gone. Sun visors, gone. Heater, gone. The steel front end replaced with fiberglass. The windows replaced with plexiglass. Ford was not playing games. Ford was playing a completely different sport. Only 100 Thunderbolts were ever built. 49 with 4-speed manual transmissions, 51 with automatics. Every single one was a purpose-built weapon designed for one environment, the drag strip, and it performed accordingly, winning the 1964 NHRA Super Stock Championship and terrifying everyone who lined up next to one before they understood what was beside them. NASCAR took one look at the Thunderbolt and banned it, which, if you think about it, is one of the greatest compliments any automobile has ever received. Today, a numbers-matching Thunderbolt is worth a staggering amount of money. But back in 1964, it was just Ford asking a simple question: how fast is fast enough? And then ignoring whatever answer came back. Number 10. The 1966 Ford Galaxie 427.
So what's it like to drive a 1966 Ford Galaxie?
Here's one that most people completely forget about, and that is a genuine crime against automotive history. The 1966 Ford Galaxie was a full-size car, a big, wide, comfortable American land yacht that looked like it belonged in a suburban driveway next to a station wagon and a lawnmower. It was the kind of car your uncle drove. Respectable, sensible, completely harmless. Until you opened the hood and found the 427 cubic inch high-riser V8 sitting in there, like a wolf that had somehow gotten into a library. Ford stuffed this engine into full-size Galaxie bodies, specifically to dominate NASCAR's superspeedways. The 427 made 425 horsepower in street trim, with race versions pushing considerably beyond that. The high-riser designation came from the engine's dramatically raised intake ports, which improved airflow and top-end power at the expense of being approximately the size of a small apartment. The Galaxie 427 could run the quarter mile in the low 14s. In a full-size car that weighed over 4,000 pounds. That power-to-weight ratio had no business working as well as it did, and yet there it was, humiliating Pontiacs and Dodges that had absolutely no idea what they were dealing with. On the superspeedways, factory-backed Galaxies were genuinely competitive with everything Chrysler and General Motors could throw at them. Ford understood something important in 1966. That speed didn't care how big the car was. Physics played favorites with nobody. The Galaxie 427 never became a household name. It's not the car people put on calendars, but it belongs in this conversation because it proved that Ford's big block program was the real deal, long before the Boss engines arrived to make everybody pay attention. Number 9. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 302. While everyone else in the muscle car era was engaged in a cubic inch arms race, Ford quietly did something that nobody expected. They built a small block Mustang specifically engineered to handle corners. I know, wild concept. The Boss 302 was born from Ford's determination to win the Sports Car Club of America Trans Am Racing Series. The rules limited engines to 5 liters, which translated to 305 cubic inches. Ford's answer was a specially prepared 302 cubic inch small block V8 that breathed through enormous valves, featured a solid lifter camshaft, and produced an advertised 290 horsepower. The real number was considerably closer to 350. Ford was playing the insurance game again. They never really stopped. But the Boss 302 wasn't just about straight-line speed. This was a balanced performance machine in a way that most American muscle cars of the era simply weren't. Ford fitted it with staggered rear shocks to control wheel hop under hard acceleration, a front spoiler that actually generated downforce, rear window slats that became one of the most iconic visual signatures of the entire muscle car era, and a suspension specifically tuned for road course competition. 0 to 60 arrived in the low 6-second range. The quarter mile clicked off in the low 14s. But the real story was what happened when the road curved, because the Boss 302 didn't fall apart in corners the way its competitors did. It actually worked. On tracks like Laguna Seca and Riverside, Boss 302 Mustangs competed against and regularly defeated dedicated European sports cars. Only 6,319 were built in 1969. Every one of them was a statement that Ford could build a complete performance car, not just a fast one. Number 8. The 1971 Ford Mustang Boss 351. The Boss bloodline produced one final descendant before the muscle car era crashed into the emissions wall, and it went out swinging. The 1971 Boss 351 was Ford's high-revving answer to everything. The engine was a 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8, built from the block up for performance. It featured enormous canted valves, 4 bolt main bearing caps, solid lifters, and a willingness to spin towards 7,000 RPM that was genuinely shocking for an American V8 of this displacement. Ford officially rated it at 330 horsepower under the new SAE net rating system. The real output was closer to 400 horses by the older gross measurement that everyone had used the year before. 0 to 60 happened in under 6 seconds. The quarter mile disappeared in the low 14s. But the Boss 351's real personality lived at the top of the rev range, where it would pull with a ferocity that smaller displacement engines from Europe couldn't match. The problem was timing. The 1971 model year was the beginning of the end. Compression ratios were being strangled by the approaching requirement for unleaded fuel. Insurance premiums had turned performance options into financial punishment for young buyers. The muscle car era was running out of road. Ford built only 1 year of Boss 351 Mustangs, 1,806 units, all of them for 1971. Then the Boss name disappeared, taking with it a lineage that had defined what a performance Mustang could be. It was, in every sense, the last of a breed, and it knew it. Number 7. The 1968 Ford Mustang GT500 KR. King of the Road. That's what KR stood for, and Carroll Shelby didn't choose that name because he was feeling modest. The GT500 KR arrived in 1968 as the most powerful street Shelby Mustang ever built up to that point. The previous GT500 had used the 428 Cobra Le Mans engine. The KR stepped things up with the 428 Cobra Jet V8, an engine Ford had specifically developed for maximum street performance. The Cobra Jet featured larger valves, improved cylinder heads, and a Holley 4-barrel carburetor sitting on a cast iron intake manifold. Ford rated it at 335 horsepower, which was, by this point, almost a tradition in terms of Ford being creatively honest about actual output. The real number was somewhere north of 400 horses, and everyone who drove one already knew that. The GT500 KR could run the quarter mile in the high 13s at over 100 miles per hour. It featured an upgraded suspension with staggered rear shocks, massive front disc brakes, and a hood with functional air scoops that actually fed cold air directly into the engine rather than just looking aggressive for the sake of it. Shelby also fitted a roll bar, proving that even in 1968, someone was at least thinking about keeping the occupants alive. Only 1,053 fastbacks and 510 convertibles were built. The KR lasted only one model year before Ford transitioned to new emission requirements that changed everything. But for one glorious year, Carroll Shelby put his name on the most brutal street Mustang in existence, and the King of the Road earned every letter of that title. Number 6. The 2000 Ford Mustang SVT Cobra R. Remember the 1999 Cobra horsepower scandal? Ford claimed 320 horsepower from the 4.6-liter dual overhead cam V8. Independent dyno testing revealed most of them were making closer to 280. Ford issued a recall, bought back cars, wrote checks, and then apparently decided the only appropriate response was to build something that would make everyone forget the whole embarrassing situation ever happened. The 2000 Cobra R was that response, and it was delivered with extreme prejudice. Only 300 were built, every single one in performance red, every single one with a manual transmission. Not one of them came with rear seats or air conditioning because Ford had decided this was a race car, and race cars don't need creature comforts, they need lap times. The 5.4-liter dual overhead cam V8 produced 385 horsepower and 385 pound-feet of torque. The suspension featured Bilstein shocks and Eibach springs. The brakes were massive Brembo units with 13-inch rotors. The wheels were 18-inch BBS units wrapped in Goodyear racing rubber. A functional front splitter, side skirts, and a massive rear wing that generated real measurable downforce completed the picture. 0 to 60 arrived in 4.4 seconds. The quarter mile passed in the low 13s at nearly 110 miles per hour. Top speeds stretched past 170. On a road course, the Cobra R could lap faster than vehicles costing twice its $54,000 price. Buyers had to sign agreements promising they wouldn't flip it immediately after purchase. Today, clean examples command well over $100,000, which suggests the people who signed those agreements may not have kept their word. I'm not judging, that's just economics. Number 5. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429. Ford didn't want to build street versions of the Boss 429. They had to. NASCAR required manufacturers to produce a minimum number of street-legal cars before they could race an engine on the track. So, Ford contracted Carcraft to shoehorn the massive 429 cubic-inch semi-Hemi V8 into the Mustang's engine bay. The process required cutting and reinforcing the shock towers, relocating the battery to the trunk, and hand-building each car individually to make everything fit. The result was either brilliant engineering or organized chaos, depending on your perspective. Probably both. The Boss 429 featured canted valve cylinder heads similar in concept to Chrysler's legendary Hemi design, which allowed for larger valves and dramatically better breathing than conventional engines. Ford officially rated it at 375 horsepower. The actual output was somewhere considerably north of 500. Ford wasn't just sandbagging at this point, they were practically burying the numbers in the backyard. 0 to 60 took around 5.5 seconds. Quarter-mile times hovered in the high 13s bone stock. With even minor tuning, they dipped into the 12s. Insurance companies saw the specifications and either refused coverage outright or quoted premiums that exceeded the monthly car payment. NHRA officials moved it into super stock classes almost immediately, banning it from competing against standard Mustangs. 859 were built in 1969. 499 more followed in 1970, before Ford ended the program. Every one of them was essentially a NASCAR engine wearing a Mustang costume. Every one of them remains one of the most revered Mustangs ever assembled. The Boss 429 didn't just make Ford's list, it made history. Number 4. The 2013 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. 662 horsepower from the factory. In a car you could drive to the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. The 2013 Shelby GT500 represented the absolute peak of the 5th generation Mustang and, at the time of its release, was the most powerful production V8 ever installed in a vehicle by any manufacturer. Full stop. That's not a regional claim or a qualified statement. That's just the number. The 5.8-liter supercharged V8 was a masterpiece of Ford's engineering department, featuring a positive displacement, Roots-type supercharger pumping 8 pounds of boost into an engine with forged internals built to handle sustained punishment. The result was 662 horsepower and 630 pound-feet of torque, delivered through a 6-speed manual transmission that required a firm hand and honest intentions. 0 to 60 arrived in 3.5 seconds. The quarter mile disappeared in 11.6 seconds at 126 miles per hour. Top speed was electronically limited to 200 kilometers per hour for tire safety reasons, which seems almost comically cautious given what the engine was doing underneath you. The GT500 could run with genuine supercars. On a drag strip, it challenged Ferraris and Lamborghinis that cost 4 times as much. Motor Trend called it one of the greatest performance bargains on the planet. They weren't wrong. Ford only offered the GT500 for 2 years in this configuration, 1969 being the peak year. When it left production, it left a gap that felt significant. Then Ford looked at what they were building in 2020 and apparently decided gaps were for other people. Number 3, the 2007 Ford Shelby GT500. Carroll Shelby came back, and he came back with a point to prove. The relationship between Carroll Shelby and Ford Mustang had been dormant since the original Shelby program ended in 1970. 37 years later, Ford brought the legend back with the 2007 Shelby GT500. And if you expected a nostalgic tribute act built on past glories, you were about to be corrected. The 5.4-liter supercharged V8 produced 500 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. In 2007, that number was genuinely shocking in a production Mustang. It was the most powerful production Mustang ever built at that point in history. 0 to 60 arrived in 4.5 seconds. The quarter mile passed in the low 12s at 112 miles per hour. Top speed reached around 150 miles per hour. The GT500 wore a unique body with functional hood vents, a revised front fascia, and a rear spoiler that communicated intent without screaming for attention. The interior had been upgraded with Shelby badge seats, aluminum trim, and details that made it feel worthy of the name on the fender. The suspension was specifically tuned for the power increase, adding stiffer springs, revised dampers, and wider performance rubber that helped put 500 horses on the pavement with some degree of reliability. Carroll Shelby personally signed the dashboard of every production GT500. He was in his 80s at the time. The man had spent decades building cars that terrified insurance companies, racing organizations, and sensible people everywhere. At 80-plus years old, he was still at it. And the 2007 Shelby GT500 proved that some things genuinely do not get old. Number 2, the 1969 Ford Torino Talladega. Yes, number 2 on a list of the fastest Ford muscle cars is not a Mustang. Take a moment, breathe, it's going to be okay. The Torino Talladega exists because of aerodynamics, specifically because Ford's engineers looked at the standard Torino body in 1968 and determined that its recessed grille and blunt nose were basically air brakes at NASCAR superspeedway speeds. So they extended the nose by 5 inches, installed a flush-mounted front end, reshaped the roofline for better airflow, and created one of the most purpose-built racing homologation specials in American automotive history. The street version came with the 428 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8, officially rated at 335 horsepower. Real-world output, as was the Ford Custom of the era, was considerably higher. The aerodynamic modifications produced measurable improvements at sustained high speeds, giving the Talladega genuine straight-line stability that standard cars couldn't approach. On the NASCAR superspeedways, the Talladega was devastating. David Pearson, Cale Yarborough, and Leroy Yarborough all piloted factory-backed Talladegas to multiple victories in 1969, winning the manufacturer's championship for Ford that season. The car was fast enough and aerodynamically advanced enough that it prompted Dodge to build the Charger Daytona and Plymouth to build the Superbird in direct response. The Talladega essentially started the winged car war. Only 745 were ever built for homologation. They sat on dealer lots for months because regular buyers thought the stretched nose looked strange. Those same cars now sell for well over $100,000. The buyers who thought they looked strange in 1969 are probably not talking about this publicly. The Talladega was never the loudest car in the room. It was just the fastest one down the straightaway. And in the end, that's what the scoreboard remembered. Number 1. The 2020 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500, 760 horsepower from the factory in a Mustang, with air conditioning and Bluetooth and a comfortable interior and room for 2 people in their luggage. The 2020 Shelby GT500 is the most powerful production Ford ever built. It is the endpoint of a straight line that runs from the 1964 GTO option package that started the muscle car era, through every Boss engine and Cobra Jet and supercharged Screamer Ford ever produced all the way to this moment. 760 horsepower. 525 production Mustangs were built initially, and they were allocated before most people knew the order banks had opened. The 5.2-liter supercharged V8, known internally as the Predator engine, featured a flat plane crankshaft borrowed from racing applications, a design that allows the engine to rev faster and breathe more efficiently than a traditional cross-plane V8. The result was 760 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 625 pound-feet of torque. The supercharger alone displaced 2.65 liters. The blower was almost as large as some 4-cylinder engines. Think about that for a moment. 0 to 60 arrived in 3.3 seconds. The quarter mile disappeared in 11 seconds, flat at 131 miles per hour. Ford claimed a top speed of 180 miles per hour with the optional carbon fiber track package wheels and Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires. The brakes were massive carbon ceramic units that could haul the car down from those speeds without complaint or fade. The chassis featured magnetic ride control suspension that adjusted damping rates in real time, a rear independent suspension that finally gave the Mustang the cornering capability its straight-line performance demanded, and a Trim-X 7-speed dual-clutch transmission that could shift faster than any human hand. The aerodynamics were functional throughout, with a front splitter, dive planes, a rear wing, and a rear diffuser that together generated 350 pounds of downforce at 180 miles per hour. This was not a muscle car playing at being a supercar. This was Ford building an actual supercar and putting a Mustang badge on it. Carroll Shelby famously said he never wanted to build a race car. He wanted to build a road car that could win races. The 2020 GT500 is that philosophy taken to its absolute logical conclusion. Every engineering decision, from the flat plane crank to the carbon ceramics to the aerodynamic package, was made in service of going faster while remaining something a human being could actually live with. The muscle car era started in 1964 because John DeLorean found a loophole in a corporate policy. It evolved through homologation specials and insurance scandals and emissions regulations and horsepower wars and everything else the industry could throw at it. And it arrived here, 760 horsepower, in a car with cup holders and lane-keeping assist. America never stopped building fast cars. America just got better at it. These 12 machines represent more than specifications and quarter-mile times. They represent 60 years of Ford engineers refusing to accept whatever number they hit last year as the final answer. They represent drag strips and super speedways and road courses and street races that probably shouldn't have happened. They represent Carroll Shelby signing dashboards in his 80s, and unnamed engineers hiding real horsepower numbers from insurance actuaries for decades. Which one of these would you drive if you had one afternoon, an empty road, and absolutely zero concern for your driving record? Drop your answer in the comments. And if stories like these are what you come here for, hit that subscribe button, because we have a lot more legends left to uncover, and we're just getting started.